Thank you for joining today's Bench2Market talk. It should be a great chat with several panelists. But I just wanted to give a little bit of an intro before we get started. So my name is Courtney Law. I'm the Managing Director of Biolocity. And our Bench2Market talk series is co-sponsored by my group, as well as the Pettit Institute and Georgia CTSA. So today's talk, again, is Journeys Through the Trenches, and we've got a great panel set up for you. Our next Bench2Market talk is scheduled for Thursday, December 15th at 11:30. It will be around protecting your innovation. So we'll have several panelists as well as a great Q&A session. If you'd like to see the full schedule for this year's Bench2Market talk series, please visit our website. And on our website, you'll also see how to register for the next talk. I want to share a few announcements for current resources that are available to folks on this call. One, Biolocity, our group is now accepting applications through December 16th for our current RFP. So if you are an Emory or Georgia Tech innovator and you're interested in commercialization funding, please visit our website at biolocity.org for application details and how to get connected with us. A new resource that's coming online at Emory is an innovation space called Lab to Launch. It is a launch pad to support innovation and entrepreneurship at Emory's campus and will be located in the new Health Sciences Research Building 2. If you'd like some more information about what this project looks like, as well as eligibility, please contact Harry Gerard, the manager for the space, and his email is on the screen. Another opportunity that we offer is legal office hours. So if you are affiliated with Emory or Georgia Tech, we do offer free legal office hours with Professor Nicole Morris. There are a wide range of topics or areas of interest that are available for discussion, and you can make an appointment at our website. And one other funding opportunity that I'd like to share with you all is through BARDA Easy BAAs. Biolocity is a part of the BARDA Drive network, where we connect innovators not only at Emory and Georgia Tech, but more broadly with funding opportunities through BARDA. Currently, they have the areas of interest open that are on the screen, and please, again, feel free to contact us if you have any questions about these areas of interest or are interested in connecting with BARDA. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Cindy Sundell to introduce the panel for today.
Thanks, Courtney. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very excited today. We have a really great panel of folks that are going to talk to us today about their commercialization journey. We have, and I'm going to do it in alphabetical order, we have Mason Chilmunzik, who is the CEO and founder of Anson Biotech. Aaron Enton, who is the CEO and founder of Inside Optics. We also have Tommy Cunningham, who is the CEO of Arthroba. Wilbur Lamb, who is the Chief Medical Officer and co-founder of Sanguina, and Brennan Torstrick, who is the president and co-founder of Huxley. I thought that what we would do today is, since we have an hour, I thought that we could go in alphabetical order, and each person can introduce themselves, talk about 5 to 7 minutes about your company, and then we can open it up to questions from the audience. And so people who have questions, if you could put those questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that chat. I also have some other questions that I can ask too if we need to, just to spark the discussion. So I think we'll start with Mason. Do you want to start by just introducing yourself and a little bit about Anson Biotech and kind of your journey from the lab to where you are now? That would be great.
Yeah, great. Hopefully there's not too much background. Happy to be here. Awesome to be on the other side of this talk. So Anson Biotech is a company I spun out of my PhD research, and we formally incorporated in December 2021. So I've been going at this just under a year formally, but prior to that, I spent about 6 years here at Georgia Tech getting my PhD, followed by another year and a half or so of postdocing. So really the journey to Anson Biotech has been a very long one. And kind of looking backwards, I think a lot of what you'll hear from founders is this all kind of makes sense looking back, so to speak. But Anson Biotech's mission, our mission today, is to drive the discovery, development, and manufacturing of next generation advanced therapies. So these advanced therapies are something I came across during my PhD research, right? I'm formally trained as a mechanical engineer. But the long story short is that these advanced therapies are the common theme between them is a lot of them are cell-based. So they rely on complex cell manufacturing workflows to produce a therapeutic product. So you've probably heard of biologics, whether you realize it or not, Humira and anything that ends in mAb. But really what inspired me was the next generation of cell-based therapies like the CAR T for leukemia, and then tissue engineered medical products for like replacing damaged organs, et cetera. So that's all great. These cell therapies are changing how medicine is done, but really they're out of reach for most patients. And I think that's something that is the main reason I do this, is that a lot of these therapies are great in theory, but unless we build the picks and axes, so to speak, to build the devices, or sorry, build the manufacturing workflows, it's never going to work. And so at $1 million per dose, thousands of these drugs in the pipeline, and most of those won't even get to FDA approval. What Anson Biotech does is we leverage a highly advanced analytical technique called mass spectrometry. Now, this is a workhorse technique within the biopharma space. And we make that simpler, faster, and more robust so that we can help these biopharmaceutical companies develop their process, monitor their process, and increase yields ultimately. So that was really, during my PhD, what we did, develop this little device that makes mass spec faster. Since then, it's been a really exciting journey. I've gotten to partner with huge biopharmaceutical companies. We have ongoing pilots with companies with drugs going into clinic, working with like Choa here to develop new cell therapies. All of that is super exciting. But I started with my first funding was Biolocity in 2020. Then I got Georgia Research Alliance, got funded by Y Combinator after that, raised a little bit of seed funding from there. And that's really what got us on. So I'll stop there. I know I probably am a little short of 5 minutes, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how I got here and, broadly speaking, what Anson Biotech is trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mason. Going in alphabetical order, Tommy Cunningham, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Arthroba?
Hi there. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody, and hopefully it'll be helpful for those on the other end. I'm CEO of Arthroba. That's a new startup out of two great professors at Georgia Tech, Emory and Sam Mobrook. Did a lot of time looking at how to measure some pretty cool signals of your joints. And can we take that information on how fluid's moving in and around the joint and use that to predict how therapies are going, physical therapies, predicting pain and injury, but more focused now on, similar to what Mason's doing, but on the other end, responses to biologics. And currently almost inaccessible technology for joint pain, but you're starting to see an emerging market there. Can our consumer wearable technology be used to be somewhat of a whoop for your joints? Get this into the hand of patients, help doctors manage their patients remotely, and get patients' knees to work a little bit better and avoid that dreaded knee replacement surgery down the line. This is the second university spin out that I've been CEO of. So I'm taking what I learned in the first one and applying it to the second one. And it's an exciting time to do that. We formed in December 2021. The way I got involved in this project was I've known Dr. Anand for years, and I've hired a lot of his interns from Georgia Tech and whatnot, some of the smartest people I've had a chance to work with. But he knew that I was looking to get back into orthopedics and biomechanics. I've done a PhD in that work. And he showed me the technology that his group was working on. And I came in as an embedded entrepreneur through a DARPA program, to where a lot of technologies fail at commercializing coming out of the university sector. So I spent a little under a year really kicking the tires of the technology, the group, putting together several business plans, and taking that for a ride with investors to say, okay, what is the company going to be? There's so many use cases for this technology, but what checks all the boxes? You know, what becomes that billion-dollar company and that opportunity? And really focused a pitch to where we are now currently fundraising and going after seed capital, and we'll be presenting the company. Our come out party is in Las Vegas on Monday at the annual Digital Health conference. So the finger on the pulse of the company right now is, you know, we are sprinting and just checking off milestones, and, you know, our goal is to get to market. You know, don't wait, go, go, go. And hopefully I'll report back in a few months and, you know, tell you about how much capital we raised and an MVP in hand. But I'll let you move on to everybody else.
Great.
Hopefully I can help.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah.
Aaron, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can give a brief background. So I'm Aaron Enton, also Georgia Tech grad. I think everyone here is Georgia Tech related in some capacity. I did my PhD and MBA out of Georgia Tech. I was dual degree. My company is Inside Optics. It's a telemedicine platform. We use computer vision and machine learning on our back end to ensure that normally untrained or unskilled professionals can record content in the right way and ensure that that content is of a diagnosable quality before they transmit it for an asynchronous diagnostic. We're heavily focused in diabetic hypertensive retinopathy at the moment, but we're also expanding into other disease sets as well. We're working with Emory Hospital at the moment to expand into digital histopathology, as well as looking at dermatology sectors for future expansions. We're already a revenue generating company, although relatively early stage. Our company as a whole is a little bit different on the spectrum as far as medtech is concerned, because we're a special classification under the FDA, which allows us to go to market a lot earlier than most other entities. Although I did my PhD and MBA out of Georgia Tech, Inside Optics is completely unrelated to my PhD. It's completely unrelated to anything that I did out of my MBA. It's not university-owned intellectual property. And I did found the company while trying to finish my PhD at the university as well. So I have that experience of trying to balance both worlds and not have it be owned by the university, and trying to spin out something that is both commercializable technology, but also something that doesn't fall within that access for entities like Georgia Research Alliance. We have raised an okay amount of capital. We did a small friends and family round and angels. We then did a pre-seed round. We're in the process of closing our tranche 1 for our seed. And based off of commitments from investors and our milestones that we laid out, it looks like we'll be opening the second tranche of our seed probably Q1 of next year, with rapid growth from there. Still a relatively small team, but excited to be moving forward and impacting lives. The really cool thing about our tech is we found ways to actually make it profitable to provide care to the most rural, marginalized minority populations throughout the US, which is one of the biggest hurdles for incredibly low margin practices in primary care and specialized care settings.
Thank you, Aaron. Wilbur, would you like to go next?
Hey,
Just kind of introduce yourself and talk about your company.
sure. Can you hear me, Cindy?
Yes.
It's all right. Okay, thanks for having me, everybody. I guess I'm the old guy on your panel right now, but I do want to kind of stress some of the similar experiences that I had. So I'm actually on my third company now, and the first one I formed was similar to the rest of your panel when I was still in graduate school. I've always been interested in diagnostics, especially home-based diagnostics, and one technology that I co-invented back when I was a PhD student, much like some of the other panelists here, was a technology that really leveraged the smartphone, and that just came out when I was a graduate student. So it shows you how old I am. And that was leveraged into a telehealth company really focused on ear infections. It was acquired by Johnson & Johnson a couple of years ago. And I just found out from my good friend who is the CEO, I was the chief medical officer of that company, that Johnson & Johnson just relaunched it. In fact, it's now they're branding it with children's Tylenol. So it's kind of interesting. And it's part of J&J's home-based kind of digital health technology platform. The second company I formed is one I'm currently a chief medical officer as well, is born out of our laboratory. It's called Sanguina. So as many of you know, I'm a biomedical engineering professor here at Emory and Georgia Tech. I'm also a pediatric hematologist at Emory and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And a lot of our lab's interest is in developing new diagnostic technologies for blood and cancer. And Sanguina is a company that is focused also on home-based diagnostics, but also in the wellness space. So a lot of what we're focused on is technologies that can be used both for diagnostics, both for companion diagnostics, similar to Emory Enon's technologies for therapeutics, but also in the wearable and wellness space. So using simple images of the body, could they actually tell us about how our body functions in terms of wellness? And Sanguina is also getting ready to go to Las Vegas as well. So, you can see how there's a lot of crossover with all these different companies. And then most recently, I formed another diagnostic company with Paco Robles here at Georgia Tech called Celia, which is also interested in new hematology-based diagnostics, really leveraging a lot of what the Robles lab does in terms of novel microscopy technologies. So I think I'll stop there. Cindy, I'm happy to answer any other questions later.
That's great, Wilbur. Thank you so much. And finally, Brennan, would you like
Sure.
to?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'll round it out with another wearable and another diagnostic. So I think we're sensing a theme here. So I'm Brennan. I'm also another Georgia Tech grad. Did PhD in mechanical engineering, but a lot of my research focused on the orthopedic space and the medical device space. So we actually started Huxley, which is not in orthopedics, as I mentioned, it's kind of diagnostic wearables, on the heels of a previous company called Vertera. After that got acquired by another company out in San Diego called Nuvasive, which was in the orthopedic space. So Huxley is quite a bit different from us. We've gone through a lot of learning experiences, but the core concept around it that really got us excited and wanted us to start something new around the spaces is the promise of wearables. And can you measure more, or what more can you measure from kind of a bunch of different sensors measuring different things on there? Not just kind of general kind of wellness and fitness, but can we be specific and more diagnostic and more precise with what we're doing? And right now, after talking to several different people, multiple different people, actually going through the NSF I-Core program and talking to a bunch of people in a bunch of different fields, really focused on the combination of sleep apnea diagnosis and cardiac arrhythmia, specifically AFib diagnosis, and trying to bundle those into one single procedure, one single device, because right now they're very siloed out. There's a lot of kind of red tape and schedules to get through. So can we combine those into a single device, which not only involves technical challenges, but also kind of billing and clinical workflow challenges as well. So that's what we're trying to do at a high level, and excited to talk with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Brennan. Do we have any questions from the audience? I see that there, Tamara, you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question? And can we unmute her? Who has that ability?
I think we can, Cindy. Let me just unmute her.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have a question. My hand was just up.
Oh,
That was an
okay.
accident.
Okay, that's fine. Are there any other questions from the audience? I have a few questions, but I just wanted to let other people chime in. This is a really great opportunity. Okay, I'll ask the first one. So I'm going to direct this question to Wilbur and Mason, but after that, anybody can answer this one. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are seeking early translational funding? And also related to that, what resources in our sort of local ecosystem were helpful to you and in your company? Wilbur, Mason, who wants to go first or answer that?
Mason, you want to go ahead?
Okay, unmute yourself.
All right, Wilbur wants me to go first. I'll give the perspective as a student, and then perhaps Wilbur can give the perspective as a professor.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'm maybe a little different than everybody else. My technology invented during my PhD with a co-inventor being my PhD advisor, who went on to become my co-founder, right? So the whole time I had to operate and play within the boundaries, so to speak, of academia, which means, but it's both good and bad, right? So there were opportunities up front for non-dilutive translational funding, like Biolocity, right? A great one. There's Georgia Research Alliance. There's also SBIRs, which, exist for those reasons. But the common thing that I found to be almost necessary if you're spinning out a technology you invented at Georgia Tech is to have your professor's buy-in. So Andre was, strictly speaking, the PI. Andre Fedorov was the PI on a lot of these grants, even though I was technically running the entire grant as a postdoc or whatever. So if you don't have the buy-in of some sort of PI professor type of person in academia, it's hard to get access to some of the best funding sources. If you don't have that type of buy-in and you're trying to figure out how can I do this, my recommendation is to look at SBIRs and maybe find somebody in the local community that might do that. But really, to be totally honest, there's actually not that much great early stage funding aside from SBIRs, Biolocities, and Georgia Research Alliance. In the Georgia ecosystem, perhaps Wilbur can mention a few other types of grants, but broadly speaking, those are the three main ones I see, especially for, I'm not DOD or something like that, which there might be other money for that. So that's kind of where I pursued it. And the big thing was, getting the buy-in of Andre, getting the chance to actually pitch my technology. The first time I applied for Biolocity, I mean, my pitch was awful and, they rejected me. And then I did a bunch of market research, talked to a bunch of customers, I mean, hundreds of customers, right? Which is basically, I think the I-Corps was mentioned a few times. Great idea. And then came back and put together the pitch and all that and represented it. But the whole time, Andre was there kind of opening the doors, so to speak. So that's the big thing for me is you need a Wilbur or an Andre to help you.
Yeah, thank you for for that lead in. And I'll just say that everything else, my answer is really complementary to that, right? From the other side, and I could answer from both perspectives. As a former student and as a professor now, it is hard to really take a biomedical technology as a student and move it forward on your own. It is near impossible here. It was near impossible back where I trained in California. And a lot of it is not just the gravitas, but the access, right? Access to the things you need to bring the biomedical technology forward, whether it's access to patients or, of course, access to funding, but really just being hooked into the political landscape. You really need that gray hair And that's something I often coach students who are in the space, that you need a champion who is simply more experienced. And in the academic center, it likely has to be a faculty member to help you drive this. So your ideal situation is an enabling faculty member that lets you, go ahead and really bring it to the next level instead of back you up. Now I'll answer it from a faculty member's perspective, maybe a junior faculty, because that's what I was when I started here over 11 years ago now, is that interest in entrepreneurship, I think the timing is good, because I would say even 10, 15 years ago in academia, that was kind of poo-pooed, right? The goal was really to publish cool papers, get good academic grants, but things like licensing your IP, spinning out your technology, that wasn't really considered what you needed to do to succeed as a professor. Luckily, the times are kind of changing a little bit, but at the same time, make sure that your bosses, your chair, your deans, know that you're engaged in these entrepreneurial activities, and make sure that it helps with your promotion, with your tenure, if you're on that track, and so forth. That was something I was fortunate enough to experience. When I was here, I had, much like students have their faculty mentors, faculty need their own mentors to really enable them to do this type of activity successfully.
Thanks, Wilbur. Brennan, Aaron, Tommy, do you have any further comments to make on this question of early translational funding, how to obtain it, what kind of your issues were with that?
Yeah, I was going to add on the very, very early stages, just kind of clarifying some things on like I-Corps and SBR, and even earlier with like the sites funding. Incredibly high impact, incredibly high probability. It increases your chances of getting those going through each stage gate much, much better. And it's actually pretty approachable. I think the sites grant's $5,000 to go to a conference, talk to a few people. I-Corps $50,000 to travel around the country, really understand if your technical idea is a good business idea. And then if you get through those stages, I wouldn't call it a shoe-in. Obviously, there's a lot of work and there's still a lot of risk that you might not get it, but it increases your chance of getting a SBR or phase 1 from NSF, or I've even seen NIH just started an I-Corps program, or at least it was new to me. It increases those chances extraordinarily.
Thanks, Brennan. That's a really good concept. Any comment? And anyone who's interested in I-Corps, either I-Corps sites, please contact me. It's very easy. You're a shoo-in, particularly if you're at Georgia Tech, to get those funds. And like Brennan said, it's up to, right now, it's up to $3,000 to attend a meeting to do customer discovery. So really, that's open to everybody, and it's a wonderful opportunity. And I also can talk to people who are interested in the National I-Corps program too, and what the requirements are for it and what's involved. So please do contact me, and I'll put my contact information in the chat. Anyone else have some comments about early translational funding? And we can go on to the next question. Okay. All right. I guess the kind of a related question is what gaps do you see in the local ecosystem, and how did you overcome them? I'm going to address this question to Tommy and Brennan if they feel comfortable answering that. If not,
Sure.
that's fine. We can go on. Yeah.
Brennan, you want to take a first stab, and I can
Sure.
follow you?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, to be honest, Cindy, when you sent this out ahead of time, I struggled to identify too many gaps. I think there is a lot of resources at Georgia Tech, at Emory, both from the engineering side, the clinical side, and even the broader kind of Atlanta community. I think obviously at some point you're going to get specific enough and your needs are specific enough that you're not going to find that here, and you just got to go find it. So unfortunately, not a super helpful answer, but I do think it speaks to the resources available here very locally.
Yeah, I would say I joke with a lot of investors and whatnot locally is because you hear no more than you'll ever hear yes. You gotta have a thick skin when you're pitching. And I joke that if I would put a parking lot or a parking structure in my pitch deck, I'd probably get funded a lot more in Atlanta. And that's just kind of par for the course with what city you're in and what's the industry. Atlanta is a building town. And you've got great healthcare with Emory, you've got great engineering with Georgia Tech, but we're starting to put some big buildings up in Midtown, downtown, and Buckhead. That's where a lot of the investors, that's the space that they know. And so it's a small ecosystem in terms of engineering or sciences and whatnot. And that can become crowded pretty quick. And so it's kind of the same usual suspects of seeing that deal. And what I've learned in looking at maybe in assessing a gap is that you might find some early stage capital here or some great business advisors. That's what Atlanta is really good at, and you have to leverage that. But at some point, you will have to branch out of the Atlanta ecosystem. So the strength of Atlanta is that if it is a smaller city, it's a big city, but a small city at the same time, word travels pretty quickly. You can build a great team of professionals to understand everything you need to know about your business, even generate first sale. Everything you need is in Atlanta to do that. But if you're going to have to raise, some serious capital or go to the next level, you can do that in Atlanta, but you're going to have to leverage your network you built in Atlanta to access the network elsewhere. And you got to start doing that early. But everything is here. It's just, it's not playing at that Silicon Valley level yet, right? It's just not there yet, but that's okay. Because there's benefits to it not being that way just yet.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I got a few things I can add there. So on Tommy's point about Silicon Valley, I think the metric is like 80% of all venture capital funding in the world is located in Silicon Valley, and the other 20% is shared amongst the rest of the world. So expanding out from Atlanta is absolutely critical if you need to raise substantially more funding. But that being said, Inside Optics and the company that I have founded thus far, we were able to raise from a handful of angels through the Georgia Tech network. So there are programs like CreateX and Tiger if you're part of the MBA program, and there's an entire ecosystem in the Atlanta Midtown area, as well as incorporated with Georgia Tech, that can bring you those first few angel investors to help you get enough to get your start, even if it's not through university-owned intellectual property. So just because a lot of the funding is not available in Georgia and Atlanta, and there may be a mismatch in expectation and valuation, does not mean that you can't go and do that. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Right. And I can opine, maybe I try to use a real example in everything I talk about, so it's just not esoteric, is for our Throba's case, what are some of our biggest weaknesses that we have to overcome? It's coming out of a lab, and there's a lot of benefits to that. But you also have to shed, are you a real business or are you still in academia? One of my jobs as CEO is to drive a wedge between that, and try to figure out how do we benefit from being in the private sector, but also having, a professor as a co-founder. How do we look at that way? So, my goal is to keep a professor, and then surround us with other individuals to where we are ready to go outside the Atlanta ecosystem with seed funding to look for more. So, to assess that need, what's the biggest perception of academia that is probably wrong, but is that, oh, you want to play lab, like work in the lab and not commercialize, right? So, well, what do you do as a startup coming out of lab? I went and grabbed, arguably the most successful sports med salesman of all time, put him on my board. That opens doors now, and he's locally in Atlanta. And so with somebody of that caliber that looks at what you're doing, comes on, says no, probably 99 out of 100 times to deals, but says yes to your deal. When you go out to reach outside the local community, people are going to take you very seriously. So filling those gaps, like that capital might not be here yet, but you can put a team together that can attract capital outside of Atlanta.
Let me see if there are any other questions. No. So when is the right time to spin out a company? Does anybody want to comment on that? And maybe what should the minimal team look like?
Yeah, I think I've got some critical insight there, considering I spun out a company at the same time I was doing my PhD and MBA. The answer is there isn't a right time. It's like, when is the right time to have a kid, right? There's not going to be an ideal time, right? If you looked right now, the answer is, well, we're about to enter into a deep recession and the fundraising is going to be difficult. And if you looked 2 years ago when fundraising was at an all-time high, you're going to be like, oh, well, I'm in the middle of my PhD and I need to write my thesis. And there's always a reason to not. That being said, there are things that you can do that you probably should do in advance of actually spinning out a company. David Rose wrote a good book called The Startup Checklist. The first 2 sections of that book outline, I think it's like 10 chapters of content that's, here are all the things you can do before you start a company to try and validate your company and what you want to do. There are also programs at Georgia Tech that help you to confirm product market fit and to validate your customer base and to determine if there's an actual need for your product and that it's not just a good idea or a want or something that makes a single person's life easier and it actually is a marketable product. So there are lots of things that you can do in advance of spinning out the company, but you also need to balance that with, you could be conducting research for 20 years and not have an answer about whether or not you should spin out a company. So there is a bit of a leap of faith, and there are a lot of people at Georgia Tech and in the Atlanta community that can help you make that determination of, is now the right time? So talk to people, do the research, take a leap of faith.
Yeah, I think I would agree a lot with what Aaron said. And I think it also depends on, obviously, your place in life and your risk tolerance as well. I think you can do a lot of things, like Aaron was saying, before taking serious funds from people, building out teams, giving people's livelihoods at stake. You can understand, can I technically de-risk this technology? Can I establish a market need? Have I talked to enough people? There's a lot you can do before taking that leap of faith, but eventually, yeah, you're going to have to take it.
Anybody else? We had a question here from the audience. I'll read it out.
And Cindy, we are getting some questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you're able to see that or if you want me to read those out.
I see that. One of them is,
Okay.
I am a professor interested in starting a company. I've sometimes heard that VCs would strongly prefer or even demand that professors leave their positions to lead the company. I'd like to ask how Wilbur's startup experience differed from the rest of the panel's experience in their initial project startup and VC acquisition, etc.
Okay, thanks, Cindy, and thanks, John, for the question. So my experience and my opinion is that when it comes to being a professor, playing the startup game, and I think the rest of the panel's experience is pretty similar, is that the best university startups are initially run not by the professor. The professor is an advisor. So my kind of rule of thumb, and this is what I tell my junior faculty colleagues, and it's not 100%, but it's certainly my general guidance, is that a successful academic startup company that's spun out of a lab usually requires at least one person whose livelihood depends on it, right? Because you need that person who's hungry, you need that person that's focused on the company, devoted to it 24/7. And the likelihood that that person is you, John, or all the other faculty members on this call, it's pretty low, unless of course you're taking a leave. So I myself, the companies my first company was when I was a student, and yeah, I formed it. I actually did take a few months off to start it, but then it got handed off to my another guy who I did my PhD with. He actually took it on so that he was the CEO, and he was really devoting all of his time doing that. That worked out. So the company that Cindy mentioned that I'm currently CMO of, Sanguina, that is spun out of my lab, immediately given to students who were just about to graduate, and took that on to become the C-suite. So I now, Erica Tyberski is now CEO. She's an alum of our BME undergraduate program here, got Biolocity funding back when it was Coulter, and CTO is a former PhD student of mine. I'm an advisor. I am not spending all of my time doing this, and we as professors, we're kind of schizophrenic anyway, right? We got all these different things going on. We don't have focus because we are needed in all these different areas, and that's not the recipe needed for a successful startup. And I think a lot of the panelists would probably agree with that.
Yeah, I wanted to add one thing actually, because I mean, I don't know what the experience exactly the makeup is, but as fundraising has gone on for me, Andre is a professor and a co-inventor and obviously a very smart guy. Kind of counterintuitively, actually, investors hate to see debt equity with non-full-time people. So the first question I've gotten in many VC interviews is, how much equity does Andre have? I tell them the number is below a certain amount, and they're like, okay, we can continue. So it's almost, unless you're George Church or something like this, it can almost hurt the company if you have too much equity for a professor. I think, Wilbur, you'd agree, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because that equity, if it's tied up with someone that's not 100% focused, then yeah, you're diluting the investor, and they don't like that. I mean, the best cases in which an academic startup is successful is you have the professor who's around as an advisor, who's the key opinion leader, so can still bring value to the technology, but isn't in the day-to-day, or at least not ostensibly. Like, that's the worst case, right? Where a professor is, oh yeah, this person's gonna be CEO, and then in reality is still doing all these different things. That's when, I mean, investors can smell that a mile away. I think Mason will agree with that.
Anybody else want to comment on that? That's a great question. Wonderful question. Have another question here from the audience regarding novel machine learning software. As it is not a tangible product, is it easier to get funding? Anybody have any insights on that one?
Yeah, well, Inside Optics is a machine learning, computer vision based software company. So I think I can provide a little insight there. I would disagree with you that a machine learning algorithm is not a tangible product or a tangible asset for your company, especially if it's copyrighted code and it's maintained as an active trade secret, or if you filed a patent on it. Those are all components that are immediately tangible, not only to your business, but also down the road for acquisition, and can lend credibility to your differentiation as an organization. As far as its impact for raising funding, there are some groups that you'll approach that if you don't have the word machine learning somewhere in your pitch, that you're not going to raise funding because they want to see the buzzword, even if it's just a linear algebra software calculator, right? You don't have to even have actual machine learning in your system, and they just want to hear it. And there are other groups that will see machine learning and say, oh, hey, I don't want anything to do with machine learning because I don't understand it. I don't want to touch it. It's just a buzzword. Even if you actually have a machine learning system or an AI that's helping you to achieve a goal, there are groups that don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So it can be helpful, it can be hurtful. It depends on who you're talking to, what your product is, how valuable it is to the heart of your product, and what you're achieving with it, and what the entities that you're fundraising from want to see from your solution.
Anybody else want to comment on that one?
From what I saw in YC, just having machine learning or AI can almost, like I think Aaron said, unless you have something to back it up, it can almost kill you. I mean, there's really smart investors out there that are like, what AI, what does it do? So it's not just easy to raise money. Those, I think just machine learning and AI are really cutting edge in a lot of ways. So it seems like it's easy to raise money, you know?
And if you are pitching with machine learning in your deck, be sure that you have exactly what it's doing, how it's built, why it's working that way, but also try and balance that with, I'm not revealing how we're doing what we're doing, right? You can whitewash it a little, but you can still talk to the specific implementation structure and utilization without revealing the actual software.
Morgan, do we have any more questions? I don't see any more in the chat. Is that?
We've got several in the Q&A.
Let me see. Sorry.
One actually, just for Aaron specifically, is how did you get your special FDA classification? How has that sped your startup along?
Yeah. So we didn't get our FDA classification, right? It's not a you petition the FDA and they assign you a thing. You have a very specific product that does a specific task, and it's defined within one of the categories that the FDA has already pre-categorized for your product or solution. So we happen to fall within a specific bucket for our classification with the FDA, which allows us to qualify as a class 1 exempt technology. Going through the FDA, it can be a very burdensome process. If you're well versed in the types of classifications and the types of systems that you want to push through the FDA, you can help to reduce that burden for your company. As far as accelerating our product and our timeline, because we're a class 1 exempt technology, we were able to go to market without having to run a clinical trial on our solution. And that we're still subject to a lot of regulation, right? We still are HIPAA compliant. We still need to meet ISO and IEC standards. There's still a lot of things that you need to do, especially with like a quality medical system. But at the end of the day, we did not have to conduct a, dual multi-year blinded study of different outcomes of different subsystems. And as a result, we were able to go to market a lot faster. That being said, it's not a, we picked this and it was just what we picked and we can move forward. It's like Brennan can't just pick that he wants to not be a class 2 if he's a class 2, right? If you're a class 2 solution, you must go through the FDA on that timeline.
All righty, we've got a lot of questions. Let me see. All right, this is from Robert Dixon. Science is cool and fun, but business aspects are daunting. How do I find and set up a business leadership team? Who wants to comment on that one? Any takers? Brennan?
As far as the full team, I'll leave up to the other panelists. I will echo getting someone on the marketing side or sales side involved is massive. I think that's one of the most successful things that we've done with both of our companies is find someone who knows the accounts that you're trying to start with, and even more, find the people who can intro you to other people, find the people who can get you to the KOLs at the top of the chain. And that goes an incredibly long way, because also salespeople, clinicians know exactly the details. They can go deep. Salespeople can't go deep, but they know the trends. They know the landscape. They can really give you the context if you're only technical and you don't really know the market.
And then you've got medical affairs liaisons that operate in that gray space in between.
I actually, maybe speaking of like a business advisor, I think there's a lot of people willing to give you business advice. So I feel like very early on, at least for me, the biggest, just go talk to the people yourself, be everybody, you know what I mean? And then like start finding the people that fill in those roles. But if you, I think it's perhaps this isn't probably what you meant, Brennan, but it's a bad idea probably to just like hire somebody that has no insight to your customer and be like, yeah, can you connect us? They need to be like the X customer profile you're going for or something like that if you're going to go that route.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd actually say that's one of the biggest misconceptions in entrepreneurship and startups in general. No one wants to steal your business idea and spin up a company around your business idea. Just go talk to people. Almost everyone is willing, especially in the environment that you're operating within. People love giving advice. There are experts that are available to you. If you don't understand something specific, you can always go out and create a method to test multiple scenarios and come up with a solution. Our business model didn't start out anywhere close to what our current business model is. And through communication, discovery, and A/B testing of different models, we've settled on something that seems to fit best for our customer base. And you can do any of those, you can do all of those.
Okay. Okay, this is a good question. Is there a certain cap or threshold that you should accept for venture capital funding? How much can you accept without being diluted out of your company? Anybody at that point? Yeah, you want to comment on that?
I mean, I would say that obviously it depends, but like the rule of thumb, I would say, is try and be the founder's own 60 to 70% of the company by the end of your seed rounds, maybe 40 to 50% by your Series A. You're in really good shape, you know. So the valuations kind of go along with that. If you're raising $1 million, that kind of goes into, you know, maybe you only want to raise at a $5 million cap. But I would tell you, it's like, don't worry too much about valuations early on, but there's a lot of deals around here that put you on a really low valuation early on that I think can be dangerous. So some of the seeming easy money can be really, 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 really low valuation that's just giving away all your company. But that's what I try and think about. Founders own 70% at Series A or by the end of your seed, and then hopefully 50% by Series A.
Balance that against I'd rather own 1% of $1 billion company than 100% of a $100,000 company, right? But
yeah, doesn't it seem like it depends? Like every like valuations, like, oh, there's a big asterisk, you know, like
yeah,
Google's coming to close your rounds, then maybe take a little less. I don't know.
a decent rule of thumb for fundraising in any round is you should look to give away between 20 and 40% of your company with each round, but know that you're not giving away 20 to 40% of the total. Your valuation is increasing and you're assigning new equity and you're issuing new shares, and that will have an impact on the overall quantity that you're ultimately giving away. But you should be giving away about a third of your company with each round, give or take. Big asterisks, big dependencies, lots of variation that depends on who you are and what you're doing.
I've always taken in my experience is, you know, coming out of a university spinoff, and you're going to see this in the market as well over the next year. It is, you need to get to revenue. Seed stage funding, you might get lucky, or I like this, you know, we have machine learning in our technology, but we don't wear it on our sleeve. But it's, you know, it's hard to compete with fundraising against two nerds in a cube. If you're trying to go build something that's FDA regulated and it takes time to do that, and you're also trying not to give away your company at the same time, you're like, hey, I need $5 million to get to what milestone, or $1 million to get maybe to an earlier one. And I think you're going to have to start taking a look at how much money do I need to take and from whom to get to the next milestone to start building momentum and traction. And it has to end at, and I was able to sell a widget and prove out the business model. Because if you do that and you get that magic sauce, your valuation, you know, money will start pouring to the companies that have shown that milestone, and the valuations will creep up. The larger rounds will get there. I think institutional capital, forget venture capital, just any institutional capital, professional investors will say, okay, that's been de-risked enough. I'm willing to pay more for that. And so, well, what do you do to get there then? And so if you're looking at, I hate the phrase angel investors, but high net worth individuals, people that are maybe professional investors by day, early seed stage founders by night, you have to reward them. And so you got to find that happy medium of, okay, if I'm reducing the amount of capital I'm going to take in to hit a milestone, I need to kind of track where my valuation is going to be at smaller tranches, so I can turn back to those early investors who might give you 25K or 50K each, and you pool that together to get started. But they might have the wherewithal to do $250,000 a little bit later on in the next round, and trying to find those types of investors. And so if they look back at how much they paid per share, what that valuation was at time a day, by the time you get to a major round, like say a Series A round, they're almost playing with house money there. They've seen that up, they've doubled their value or tripled that perhaps. And you might have only diluted your company by 20-25% to really obtain some milestones. That all said, if somebody's going to write you a $5 million check, take it and just go and get it done. Don't worry, don't sweat the little things to get there. Make sure it's the right partner that can grow with you, and you're off to the races. Don't sweat it.
Okay, well, we are coming up on the end of the hour here. Maybe we can take one more question, if everyone doesn't mind. Is that okay with everybody? All right. We have a question here on, at what stage of development and funding pitch preparation is the technology reimbursement landscape considered? Anybody want to comment on that one?
I'll jump in. I think the majority of the time the answer is going to be from the very beginning. It has to be. That is how you make money in the US healthcare space, at least now.
Anybody else?
And if you want to shift an entire market, it's not covered, and it's going to be a longer haul, and you're going to have to figure out a different business model to get there. Your reimbursement's either there or it's not, basically, right? So respond accordingly. Your either business model is going to be based off reimbursement or it's not. And, both have positives and negatives to it. You're going to have to decide on what that is. But getting a new code and reimbursement and showing that, avoid that like the plague. And that is a process you do not want to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really poignant comment, Tommy, if your business model requires reimbursement, then you need to know what the reimbursement is, how it exists, how it operates, what the space is, and you need to know that up front. If your business model doesn't require reimbursement, then you don't need to know about that space necessarily. It may be useful for looking at competition, but your investors are investing based off your business model. And if reimbursement is part of your business model, you need to have that in place.
Well, I'd like to, we're at 12:31 now. I'd like to thank all the panelists. This was a fantastic conversation, and really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time.